she's a mess. Town clerk. Oh my gosh.
Councilor Lambert.
Present.
Councilor Roderick.
Present.
Councilor Durfee.
Present.
Councilor Ruda.
Present.
Councilor Leonard.
President.
Councilor Costa.
Here.
Councilor Bowen is absent.
The next business brought before the council would be the consent agenda, and I would ask if Councilor Roderick, if you'd be so kind to read the consent agenda tonight.
This evening's consent agenda is approval of the council workshop minutes from June 29, 2009, approval of minutes from June 22nd, 2009 regular council meeting. Councilor Leonard abstained as absent. Approval of executive session minutes from June 22nd, 2009 council meeting. Councilor Leonard abstained, absent. Approval of executive session minutes from March 12, 2009 council meeting. Councilor Leonard absent. Receipt of minutes from the following boards, commissions: Recycling Landfill Committee 2, Conservation Commission, Harbor Commission, Open Space Commission, School Committee, Wastewater Commission 2. Correspondence received and filed. Received from Housing Works Rhode Island regarding 5th edition fact book on affordable housing, book available in the clerk's office. Received from State Traffic Commission regarding parking on Main Road. Received from Pat Sullivan, Tiverton Conservation Commission regarding crosswalks on Main Road. Received from Michael Layton, CEO Tiverton Power Incorporated, regarding comments for public hearing on zoning map changes request at Town Council meeting June 8, 2009. Received from Brayton Woods Owners Association regarding opposition to expansion of the Tiverton Power Plant. Received from Dr. Jeremiah Lowney Jr. regarding moorings in both Tiverton and Portsmouth sides of the Tiverton Basin on Saconnet River. Copy forwarded to the Harbor Master and Harbor Commission. Received from the City of Pawtucket regarding resolution requesting Governor Kachiri hold an education summit. Received form Town of Warren regarding resolutions pertaining to opposing electric rate increase, opposing health insurance rate hikes, and supporting House Bill H5039 related to drunk drivers. Response to Mr. Alan Chase regarding distribution of information sent to council. And last one, approval of tax assessors abatements.
Okay, that concludes the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to accept?
Excuse me.
I'd like to remove number 4.4, which is the approval of the tax assessor abatements.
Okay. Is there anyone else?
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda except for 4.4.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Oh,
Excuse me.
Oh.
Hi, this is Dave Vania, Tiverton Harbor Master. As far as 3F goes, the letter received from Dr. Jeremiah Lowney,
Okay.
we're in the process of writing a letter to to him explaining how many commercial moorings we have in the basin. We do have none, according to his letter.
Wait a minute.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
You just want it removed from the agenda.
Agenda.
And then...
Yes.
We'll take
okay.
it up.
Just
All
hang
right.
on 1 second. Okay?
All right,
okay.
thank you.
So we'll also remove then 3F as well. So now do we have a, oh, we did have a second, right?
Yep.
Okay, the motion and a second. All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, Ms. Durfee?
Well, I will defer to the harbor master
Okay.
if he wishes to take up this item first.
Yeah, real quick. As far as Mr. Lowney's letter, he was in question as why Pirate Cove and other commercial operators had the ability to tie up the Tiverton Basin with moorings. As far as what our schedule looks like right now, according to our municipal plan, we're allowed 158 moorings in the Tiverton Basin. We have a total of 160 right now presently. As far as commercial moorings, there are 5 assigned to Quality Yachts, 7 assigned to Tiverton Yacht Club, and 65 to Standish Marina. Commercial moorings in the town are 77. Non-commercial moorings, we have 83 in town. That's approximately 48% is commercial in the basin presently. We are losing, Quality Quality Yachts will be losing 2 of their 5 moorings because of the new expansion of their marina. It will take 2 of their moorings away, and we will not issue any new moorings in the basin right now because the basin is presently full. So that's where we stand right now. I am writing him a letter to warrant that, to explain that to him.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Sir, can I
Yes.
ask you a question?
Sure.
In his letter, he talks about the cost for these moorings to the town and the profit that's being made by these commercial.
Well, I don't know what the commercial mooring vendors are charging for moorings, but the town charges $300 for each commercial mooring. So we're making approximately $20,000 from Standish Marina alone. Tiverton Yacht Club would be, 300 times 7, and same thing with Quality Yachts, 5 times 300, so 1,500 there.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Durfee?
With regard to the tax assessor abatements, it raises the question, as you know, the town administrator at the financial town meeting asked for an allocation of $300,000 to take care of the abatements of this type. And that was voted down by the assembled meeting. But as the abatements come in, and these are the first for this calendar year, which is 09-10, would like to suggest to the town treasurer and that on our expenditure sheet, we have a new item showing a 0 appropriation and the amount of abatements that we approve.
I will do that.
Because then we can track, because those abatements, every single one that we grant, the money has got to come from somewhere. And it either comes from our revenue, we know, and we're not going to get probably any more. And as we take the abatements and approve them, it may have to come out of expenditures and budgets. So, Mr. Administrator, do you have any comment on that?
No, other than that would be our intention, is to reduce expenditures by the abatements that are authorized by the council.
Okay, and I think tracking those would be helpful for the council on a cumulative basis.
Yes.
Because at some point,
You will see them in your monthly reports. The tax assessor generally, tracks them, and every time you get an abatement, you can get a report with the cumulative amount. But this will serve as a duplicate. It's fine.
because the monthly reports have just started from the tax collector, have they not? We just received one. But the
Right.
revenue reports, we receive every month.
Monthly.
So that is a request to the town treasurer.
Okay, let's take a vote. Yeah.
Yeah, I make motion that item 3F and item 4 be approved with the changes made and the explanations.
Second?
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor? That's unanimous. The next item of business is financial business. Town administrator, request approval to carry forward the balance of $79.33 in account number 665-690, Arts Council expenses.
Make a motion that we approve that carry forward.
Second?
Okay, there's a motion and a second.
I have a question.
Okay.
Isn't it a little bit too late to be carrying forward now? We're in July. The whole fiscal year is closed, is it not?
No, we can still provide this. None of it has been spent, and it's just a timing item. You know, the request came through on June 24th, which was after the last meeting. So we had to postpone it until this meeting.
Okay. Should we take a vote? Oh, did we get a yeah, Hannibal, did you second?
I
No, I
Oh,
didn't.
oh, okay, okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of that carry forward balance transfer? Raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous. No opposed? Any opposed? Oh, I'm sorry, Hannibal. One opposed. The next item is Town Administrator. Request approval of wastewater budget for fiscal year 2009-2010.
Request that the council approve this budget. Mr. Limcourt is here. If you have any questions regarding any of the details, we have reviewed it, and it appears to be appropriate.
I had a question with regard to the sewer usage fee.
Sure.
That has gone down, or has usage?
Sewer usage fee, if you remember correctly, last year, the City of Fall River pulled out the tunnel tunnel project from the wastewater fees. So our sewer usage fee payable to Fall River went from $5.94, I believe it was, down to $3.94. So that's, yes,
$2, roughly a $2 change.
yes.
Thank you. Is that tunnel project, what is the status of that?
They are about 90% complete. I think they're working on their last projects. They're actually connecting the surface collector sewers into the tunnel.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to?
I'll make a motion that the proposed operating budget be approved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Lincoln. The next item on the financial business is the town clerk. Request carry forward of $3,300 to hold in reserve for mailing notice on the no bin, no barrel program from account number 197-550 probate recording and account numbers 103623 Board of Canvases Supplies.
I'll make a motion that carry forward be approved and reserved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
I have a question.
Okay.
Regarding taking funds from the probate recording, do we have enough in there budgeted? Should the
These
probate
funds would have been
recording?
returned to the general fund, but when you had the workshop on the 29th, there was available funds still in some accounts. It would be going back to the general fund if they were not going to be used by those two departments.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve this carry forward balance. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, appointments and resignations. We have the resignation of Diana Toasty from the Recreation Commission.
Excuse me. Request that the council accept the resignation with regret. The individual will be relocating to the West Coast, which is what's causing this resignation.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Okay, we accept this resignation with regret. Nancy, will you be sending a letter to Mrs. Toasty?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Okay, the next is an appointment of Chris Romelin for an unexpired term to June 30th, 2010, interviewed by the council on January 2009, for an appointment to the Recreation Commission.
I'll make a motion that Mr. Renlund be appointed for the unexpired term ending 6/30/2010.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to accept the application of Chris Ryman to the open seat of the Recreation Commission.
Madam President, I would just like to note that he did interview with the council back in January.
Yep. Okay.
And I would like to note, Madam President, that Mr. Rhineland and whoever it was that we did appoint were almost a tie, if I remember correctly. I think he's
Yep.
well suited for the job.
Yes.
I remember him well.
Yes, very much. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of this appointment? Unanimous? Thank you. I'm sorry, what's my hand? It's just so automatic. Okay. The next will be an interview with Christopher M. Higgins of 80 Grinnell Avenue, Vacancy and Cemetery Committee. Mr. Higgins?
Good evening.
Welcome.
How are you?
Great, thanks. How are you?
Very well, thanks.
Good. We usually conduct this interview and the council members will ask questions of you. So anybody has questions of Mr. Higgins?
Okay, first, Mr. Higgins, thank you for applying, but why don't you sit down?
Oh, okay.
Make yourself comfortable, be a little easier.
And my first question is somewhat of a tradition. Why are you interested in the position, and what do you think you will contribute to the Cemetery Commission?
I was asked by my neighbor, Bob Vieira. I don't know what I can contribute, but I've never done this before, so other than having my house being in a butter to the cemetery.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Mr. Higgins, do you realize that there are people dying today that never died before?
Yes.
Okay.
This is for a term, Nancy,
several committees, but since his was already in, I thought we should at least get the interview
Oh, okay.
questions out. Okay. So there are.
So we
others
won't be
that-
appointing tonight then?
No, you wouldn't. The policy is that you wouldn't
Right,
appoint them.
okay.
I'm not familiar with that. They're not familiar.
Policy on appointments is that they come forward, this was a policy set by Councilor Maderas. They come forward and they're interviewed, but we also have to advertise, place in the paper that there are vacancies. And that is being done on this because we just received a resignation from Eugene Raposa that was on it. So I'm just saying there are others as well, but Mr. Higgins, his was clocked in on the 8th, it made the time. And
Okay.
so the interview was, thought would be done for.
Okay,
so Mr. Higgins, thank you very much for coming.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Request zoning changes continued from June 22nd meeting, as well as a report from Town Solicitor Andy Tights.
Good
Okay.
evening.
Good evening.
Chris?
I think everybody's got the memo from Andy, Mr. Tights, and I met with him and we looked at this schedule, and after that there was a planning board meeting and I went over some of the proposed changes that he was looking for and some of the ideas that we talked about, and the planning board was pretty adamant that they would like to see this before them prior to it coming back to the council, because there will be some substantive changes. So I have a couple proposed schedules as well. And also on the Schedule B, which Mr. Tights provided, On the 24th, which would have been the public hearing in that, I will not be available on that day, so.
Okay.
Pass this out. On this, there's a Schedule C and a Schedule B. The Schedule C would only be if the council wanted to have a special hearing on September 8th. But the Schedule D, I think, is probably the more realistic one, and that gives a little bit more time between the planning board and the council meetings. And I think they would also allow the council or the planning board to have a second meeting if they needed to. So. I don't know what the Mr. Tights' availability is, if Schedule D can conflicts with any of that, or.
Chris, I didn't quite get your point on which of these dates is a problem for you. Is it the 9/14 date?
No, I'm sorry, on the one that Mr. Tights provided in his memo. At the bottom.
Schedule D works fine for me. I'm already planning on attending the planning board meeting on the 4th of August. And for the town council review on the 11th, I'll be here for that as well, presumably, so. And on the 14th of September.
Then I will make a motion that, on a going forward basis, that Schedule D be the appropriate schedule to follow that would allow a little more time for people to review and comment.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion?
The memo for me, I think you ought to probably deal with that motion, but then I do want to discuss another item on the memo
Okay.
before you move on.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, it's unanimous. Okay.
Page of the memo, I would like to see the creation of a zoning revision advisory committee. This is related to the first one because I think particularly now that we have this Schedule D, which gives us a little more time, we could conceivably have this committee appointed, say, at the next council meeting, and then there'd be time for this committee to review it. But more importantly, going forward, I think we're going to be faced with a lot of zoning amendments this year. We've got to do a comprehensive revision of the zoning ordinance and map to bring it into consistency with the 5-year update of the comp plan that we've just completed. We've also got the pending zoning amendments for the Tiverton Yacht Club, which are being delayed currently because there's a pending request for an advisory opinion from the Ethics Commission on who can sit to hear them, but they will be coming sooner or later, probably sooner. And we also have a new one in today's packet that you may decide to act on, requesting zoning amendments regarding the signs at Tiverton Four Corners. So we have a lot of these things coming up, and I think it would be good to have a good working committee representing a lot of interests to be able to review and also to some extent coordinate these different amendments so that we're not working on different things at cross purposes at different times. So I don't envision this as a permanent committee in the town, but I do envision it probably for much of the next year until we get through with these smaller ones and the big one that we'll need to do for the comp plan. And that way everybody will be aware of each step of things, how they go, rather than everybody having to be, I mean, right now the planning board, it's worked on the staff, and the planning board reviews it, then you gotta start over again when it gets to the council. And this would include the various staff people, including the zoning officer and the administrative officer actually working with it. And I'd also like to suggest that there be a local developer and a local attorney and a local design professional to provide input, people who regularly appear before the boards. So at this point tonight, I'd be just looking for your agreement to create it, and then I would prepare a formal resolution and for appointments at the next meeting.
I do think it has merit, because it does put the stakeholders together prior to, I think it will save time and also get varying points of view even before we comes to the council and then to a public hearing. So I think the concept is a good one. And it's something that we talked about when we were doing the comprehensive plan as to whether we would appoint such an advisory committee to work on the implementation. And now we have other things to consider. So I think the concept is beneficial.
President, I guess I'm a little bit puzzled why we would want to create an additional layer of bureaucracy when we already have planning board, zoning board, council, so on and so forth. Also, I may have missed it, but I'm not quite clear that if such a committee was appointed, what would be their position in the current organizational chart? Would they report to the planning board, the zoning board, the council, the administrator?
Yeah, that was my question too.
It
Who
just
would they
seems
be
like
advising?
We've got an extra layer in here that I'm not quite sure that we need.
Well, I don't envision it so much as an extra layer as basically an integration of the different layers. As far as whom it would report to, I've left that open. I would probably suggest that it be the town planner that be the coordinator as far as, or the administrative officer as far as reporting to. But the point is, it's not necessarily going to be reporting to. It's not going to be. It's an advisory committee. It's so that the drafts that are prepared by the various parties have a common body to review it. Like, for example, the zoning board is a good. The zoning board doesn't per se review zoning amendments, but yet they deal with it a lot. They have to. They have to deal with the consequences. The same thing, the zoning enforcement officer. He has to enforce the ordinance. He's got all sorts of items that he deals with on a daily basis that he's creating a list of, these are things that cause a problem in my daily job, you know, what can we do with it? But that we'd have a whole group to review it and provide advice for it. I don't see it as that formal a body that is quote-unquote reporting to someone, but what I found is it helps so that you don't have, for example, I mean, vis-a-vis the town council and the planning board, you don't have a lot of time spent on, you don't get very involved in something that has no chance of passing anyway, as far as getting input for the council, say, you know, this is a good idea, but it's not going to have much chance of passing. And vice versa, the same thing with the council. I mean, you get educated from scratch each time it's here. If there's council input, it helps to provide the process, it helps to provide the planning board members there. Same thing with the developer. I mean, I've been on this many times, and the developer's attorney, I think, add valuable input to it about just the practical things of, you know, that looks great on paper, but, and sometimes it's not so much just criticizing what you've written, I don't like that, I don't like that. More it's, okay, I've got this lot here, if I've got something like this, and I've got 5,000 feet here, what is it gonna look like? And there's been a lot of, I think, beneficial work, at least on many of the committees I've been at, when the people who are dealing with these things every day provide you with input and advice as to what they see are the issues and problems. And the same thing with having the council and the planning board and the zoning board members, they can provide it. So as I said, over the years, I found it useful rather than a hindrance in adding another layer. I found that in the end, it keeps things moving quicker rather than slower.
Madam President, may I ask a follow-up question? When you say local, does that connotate that they have to be a Tiverton resident or that they're just active?
Active locally. My goal would be, and I mean, I'd look to the people of the various boards. Who do who do you see before you regularly, who you respect and could provide the input?
And would they volunteer?
And would they volunteer? And in fact, probably the better people are the people who won't come forward and volunteer. The people you want are probably the ones you're going to have to ask, will you do it? Again, even there, I've usually found that in the end, there are people, and they realize that they're going to help. In the end, they're going to help themselves in the process if they have a chance to participate and provide input. And does every bit of input that everybody provide get adopted? Obviously not. So anyway, short answer, no, not a resident necessarily of the town, just someone who's appearing regularly.
Madam President, can I?
Yes.
As Mr. Tights noted in his memo, that I'm still generally opposed to this idea, only because of the added layer that I see, because the way our zoning reads is that either it starts at the council, then it gets referred to the planning board, or it starts at the planning board and then goes to the council. So this would still have to go through those processes. In addition, you're creating potentially an advisory committee of 14 members, including both the town solicitor and the assistant solicitor, which I'm sure is going to be an additional cost to the town. So it's just to coordinate a group this large and try to get all the different input and try to get these changes through quickly, I think is problematic. I think the larger problem in this is that the way this has worked in the past is that, in the last case, I gave a presentation, I gave a workshop to the council, most everybody was here, and they saw the reasons for the zoning changes. But typically that doesn't happen, and the planning board gets up to speed on this, and then it comes before the council really just to set a public hearing date rather than me being allowed to come here and present this. Because even with 2 members, town council members on this committee, that doesn't mean the rest of the town council understands the zoning changes unless there's conversation going on, which you really can't have. So, I don't think that really streamlines that process or brings the whole council into the mix. I think a better process would be where the proposed zoning changes come to the council in the form of either a workshop or a presentation, so they understand what these changes are about. And in terms of the need to do all these zoning changes to bring it into compliance with the comp plan, because it's just recently been updated, while that is true in accordance with state law, the larger problem is that our zoning is not in compliant or is completely out of sync with reality and with common sense. I mean, you've got, just for instance, Riverside Drive, the waterfront side of that, there's about 90% of those are residential properties. In our waterfront zone, residential is a not permitted use. And we have those all over town, and those are the things that we need to deal with. And with the GIS, which we're planning to go live with our GIS website in the next week, and that should be fully functional. And then once the software is loaded, we'll be able to do these queries very quickly and be able to put together a lot of these proposed zoning changes very quickly and get them to the planning board. I just think with this entire setup, it becomes very cumbersome and I think, frankly, hard to manage. So that's my opposition to it. Not that I don't think it's the idea of bringing in other people is necessarily a bad idea, but I think in other towns that I've seen, typically when you have a political body like a council who's going to be voting ultimately on these zoning changes, they tend to not want to be involved in the creation of the zoning changes and then have to vote on them later. So that's why I'm opposed.
But I think
And
in
that's-
some ways, I've sat through many zoning hearings, and people will raise issues that should have been ironed out if the building inspector had his or her input. And so many times that it slows it down, etc. I think if you have the stakeholders as a group looking at things, raising issues, I do think things will move faster. And there's something to be said when you're dealing in zoning, is to have the number of stakeholders. For example, EDC never has a role in any of our planning. I mean, they rarely are a separate, but here they would have a person who is speaking up with regard to any proposed changes. I think that's important as we go ahead, and I think that is true, but I must say, oftentimes we will get things. They have not been thoroughly vetted. And this is a group, I think, that would vet. And I think that is helpful to a council.
in order to remove some of the confusion and some of the layering, maybe we could change the process. And that is to refer zoning changes to this board and not to the planning board. Remove that function from the planning board. They're a very busy group and kept busy by contractors. If they didn't have to deal with zoning changes, that would reduce their workload, and they could get their information the same way everybody else does with regards to zoning law.
But they would
Well, I
still
think that's
have to
required under
review
s-
it in order to recommend to the council.
Right, and I think that's still required under state law.
Yeah.
But I think also, you know, the planning board did create an ad hoc zoning advisory committee, and we started with just members of the planning board. The idea was to sort of get our hands around it and start to look at some of the different issues, and then bring in the stakeholders, and that's really where we were going at this. And that way it becomes a little bit, it's on the planning end of things first, and then it goes to planning, and then it would come to the council, so it sort of stays at that end, but I'm just, this
I don't
just
know.
looks like I mean, I could look at this group and I could say there's, you know, probably 6 or 7 other stakeholders that aren't on this.
Like who?
Open space, conservation, harbor management,
General public.
general,
No,
yeah.
they are, the public. Well,
So, you know, I mean, you can, and I think you tend to look, I think it's really going to be like in these commercial zoning proposals that I've come up with. I've been going to economic development committee meetings, explaining to them what the process is and explaining to them why these zoning changes are necessary, and getting their support and getting their input, so.
I understand that.
I think it's really the
Remember the
difference.
draft that we had 2 weeks ago?
Mhm.
I think that would have been helped by having the stakeholders take a look at that draft before it comes to the council. It's now in a process of being redrafted. We're under a Schedule D, and I think those kind of delays could be avoided if we had the vetting process that a stakeholder group can look at. So, I mean, if we want to get things done, having the issues out there thought through before it comes to the council, I think has some merit, that's all.
Okay, well, I think the only, you know, in that particular case, the only, none of these stakeholders, other than the town solicitor, had any input or had any objection to those. So, you know, I think that could have just been by having the town solicitor at the planning board meeting when we're doing that, or having him review it prior to it coming to town council. But again, that was a process where, as far as I could read in zoning, it was set up where the zoning, it either starts at the town council and then gets referred to the planning, or that can be waived if it starts at the planning board and comes to the council. But there was nowhere in there where I felt that I could take it from the planning board, then refer it to the town solicitor, and then go to the council. You know, and obviously it had been examined by the planning board solicitor, so just difference of opinions, really, in terms of legal opinions on that.
Madam President, I agree with some of the things regarding an advisory committee, but when I look at the scope and the number of people here and trying to get them all to attend meetings and to get their input in, my gut tells me that this is only going to delay it further. Because if you want 2 members of the council, 2 members of the planning board, and so forth and so on, to get them all there to meet and agree, and then in turn go back to the planning board for them to draft whatever they need to do, and then again come back to the council, I think it becomes too unwieldy.
I think what you
Well,
could do
if I-
to avoid that might be to, when you have a draft zoning amendment, before it's voted on the planning board, that could get sent out to all these different committees for input, just like we do with major land development. It goes to the fire chief, police chief, and then they have X amount of days to comment on it, or they can attend the public hearing and make some comments that way. In this case, they would attend the planning board. I think that might be a quicker way of doing it, rather than trying to create all these different meetings, but
Because, to be honest, that doesn't work, because the fire chief has his, but I think if you're on a committee, you're in a room, and you're hearing comments back and forth with regard to, hey, maybe that has some merit, or maybe it doesn't, maybe we should excise this out. That's a very different setting, and just sending it around for comment really never really produces a work product that I think this is trying to get at.
But realistically, where would you stop it in
Wait a
this?
minute, wait
Madam
wait a minute.
President, I've already had a say, so I would yield to either Mr. Lambert
Right.
or
But I wanted to hear from Andy.
yourself.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to respond to Councilor Costa's comment, because I think the planning board is a statutory requirement for them to review it and recommend and find consistent with the comp plan. But I do think that this would actually also help the planning board's workload as well, because that's the point. I envision not that it's going to be doing the drafting in the planning board stage, but it would be doing the drafting would be still, you know, probably a much smaller group like Chris and myself and Peter Ruggiero. Then we've got the advisory committee to review it, and then, you know, once it's been vetted, then it's going to the planning board, so that there's less likely a need to redraft it. The planning board will have the final say before it goes to the council. They have to by statute. But hopefully it would be smoothed along, even for the planning board, if we had the input ahead of time.
Now, in your experience, have you had this many people on a committee?
I don't expect them all to show up at every meeting. As a practical matter, it's not going to happen. I do think if you schedule the meetings carefully at the beginning, usually you can find one day in the month that
So they know
everybody can
ahead.
make, and we say, okay, we want you all to hold, whatever it is, the third Thursday of the month or whatever. We're holding. We're not sure we're gonna have a meeting or not, but that's the date we hold for this committee. Usually it can be done, and usually you can get enough of the people, most of the people, to do that, and get a meeting together. It's a difficult decision between saying, okay, you know, more than 3 people can't decide where to have lunch, let alone write an ordinance, and wanting enough varied input to make it useful. You know, so I'm not wed to this. If you want to cut out a couple of people, add a couple of people. Either way, I just do think the basic point of having the different stakeholders and having a broad view of it is important. And I don't think overall it will slow it down. I mean, I was only an observer by reading the newspaper. The last time the town went through a major zoning ordinance change, when you're trying to get that ordinance changed, but my recollection, it was over a year. The public hearings got continued and continued with the council. So overall, I think this will be a time saver.
It was every Monday night for a year. Every other Monday night for a year.
So I think this will be a time saver rather than a time waster. And as I said, even if everybody doesn't come to every meeting, at least you've got the point. They can input by, you know, they can get the email. And as I said, it would probably be a much smaller group, subcommittee that's still going to be doing the actual drafting. And in fact, even reviewing stuff that's coming from totally outside.
Chris, I've asked you before to write a memo. I don't want to keep assigning you tasks. But would you be in favor of reducing to writing your feelings about this kind of a committee? And then I'm going to ask the council to postpone this to the next meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be glad to put it in writing what my,
What your objections are.
not just objections, but, an alternate way to achieve this rather than creating a committee or doing it this way where it's sort of front-loaded. I'm just, and I don't know, I mean, this is, at this point, Mr. Tice has written this up, just sort of the membership, obviously, he hasn't, he's sort of left it open-ended in terms of how it would operate, who it would report to, or how it would report to, and I think those are the things that, for me to even support this, I'd have to sort of get a handle on what that is to make sure that it really is not going to be something that's going to hold up the process, because, I mean, the process is long enough as it is.
Yeah,
And I think really I'd
like to see something with a reference to the structure. They're just going to have a chairman and a vice chairman, and with minutes be taken. I'd like to be able to read what the committee is doing, what they think, and what the pros and cons were, and so forth.
Right, but,
The
you
more
know,
information we get, the better the quality of our decisions.
I'm sure it'd be subject to the open meeting law as an advisory committee, so all of those requirements would be followed. But I don't know, Hannibal, rather than just delay it, I think we should at least vote on a concept as to whether we would want a advisory committee, however it's constituted. Maybe we can shorten it, etc. But mindful of the fact that not everybody is going to be drafting. That is going to be confined to, you know, getting it done probably by Peter and Andy and town planner.
But what would be wrong with delaying it for 2 weeks?
Well, you can,
Nothing.
you can.
Nothing.
That's- If we delay it 2 weeks, I seem to me we have to give some directions as to to come back to us, so we don't delay it another 2 weeks as we, if we at least approved of a concept, subject to fleshing it out with regard to maybe cutting back the membership, having one member of the council, one member, I don't know. But I guess it's a concept that we need to either address or not address.
Mr. Lambert?
Yeah, if Mr. Costa has made a motion, I would second it.
No, I was gonna ask.
If not, I would make a motion that we do continue it for 2 weeks.
I'll second.
I really have no objection to the concept, Ms. Durfee. I'd like to get the other viewpoint to make sure we have an understanding of why we shouldn't have this new committee. But if we, and I certainly would be prepared to vote in 2 weeks at our next meeting.
Okay.
Madam President, since everybody's had a chance, I would come back my second cut and say I'm prepared to vote right now, and my vote is no, because in some 30-odd years of management experience in a variety of organizational settings, if you really, really, really want to kill an idea, what you do is you create a committee. And if you really, really, really want to kill an idea, you create a big committee. And 14 people is not a big committee, it's a mob. So it just seems like all we're doing is just creating a bureaucratic level that we really don't need. And also, we've got charter.
That's why I think, I'd like to get a concept of just how it was going to work, because if you treat it as an advisory committee, and its only responsibility is advisory, you can move on without them. If they're
Then
not
what's-
timely,
then-
not prompt, you don't like their advice, you simply move on.
Then what's
But
the
they-
purpose?
Because they can contribute some new ideas. With the number of people we've identified here, who obviously would have some sort of expertise, they're either going to contribute to the process or they're not. If they're not, we move on. At some point, we end up changing our mind about an advisory committee. But it isn't part of a timetable. You're sort of in the background giving what I'd consider to be sort of expert advisory viewpoints, hopefully, when you get professionals like architects, engineers, landscape architects, attorneys, hopefully they're going to contribute something.
Probably so.
I'd like to, as I say, I'd like to give it maybe a couple more weeks.
All right, well, I believe we have a motion and a second on the floor. Those in favor of was it Mr. Lambert's or Mr. Costa's motion? Mr. Lambert's motion
We have a joint motion.
to postpone this item until our next regularly scheduled meeting. Please raise your right hand.
Madam
I'm sorry.
President, just make an addendum, because I believe that in the interim, we're waiting
For a memo from Chris.
Right,
But Chris, you'll have that memo in the packet for the next meeting,
right.
before the next meeting.
Right.
I just
Okay.
want to make sure that's understood.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed?
For different reasons, surely, Mr. Leonard.
Yes, Mr. Leonard being on the right side of the issue.
The motion continues it to the next regularly scheduled meeting. Thank you. Okay, the next item is new business. Town Council Landfill Subcommittee, Recycle, No Bin, No Barrel, and Pay-As-You-Throw programs forwarded from the June 29th workshop, and a Town Solicitor Draft Ordinance Amendment. Good evening.
Well, I am prepared to make a motion that we advertise the proposed ordinance for hearing for the first meeting in August.
I would second that.
Okay, can I just make,
We need, No, we need 21 days as an ordinance. No, it's an ordinance, we need 21 days.
We have 21.
I think we need to. Go down to the
August
24th.
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 That's 21 days in the weekly newspaper cycle for this law.
Are we talking about the no bin, no barrel portion of this? Or we're
Yes.
talking about-
Yes. That's for the draft ordinance, is for the no bin, no barrel policy.
It does not include the PAYT portion, does it?
No.
No.
Okay.
Just so that, Hannibal, the ordinance, which is curbside collection, which we already have, it's just one sentence. The town reserves the right to deny collection of municipal solid waste from any household that shall not comply with recycling regulations and shall not set out for collection recyclable containers with required recyclable materials therein.
But I just have one comment. Would it be practical to either say either or, the blue bin or the green bin, instead of both bins, for those people that may not have that type of volume of recyclables in either one of those?
We really discussed that at length with our subcommittee, and there were some members that had the same thoughts that you have, and but we came to a consensus that we feel to make the program work to the full effect. I know it's inconvenient. There may be some times when you bring out a bin with nothing in it, but we're all in favor unanimously that both bins be put out, or your rubbish will not be picked up.
Okay.
And we did vet it
Okay.
for a while.
Madam Chairman, may I address the council?
Sure, if you come to the podium, please, and state your name and address.
Yes. My name is Virginia Butterworth. I live at 1690 Main Road, opposite the Standish Boatyard. For those of you who are unfamiliar with my location, I have a picture of my house and a picture of Mr. Standish plowing North Avenue, so that you have a sense of what our problems are. And it particularly addresses the remarks you just made. I am here to speak for my neighbors and myself regarding the proposed recycling rules, which we all view as a potential hardship for senior citizens. Those of us who are past retirement age, which includes me, and live in one or two person households, seldom generate a full bin of recyclable items on a weekly basis. Therefore, I, like my 72-year-old neighbor, Fred Standish, and the Marshalls who live on West Avenue, Mr. Marshall is 82 or 83, Lois is 75. We generally wait until the bin is more or less full, about once a month for me, unless there are special events like the 4th of July, before hauling our bins to the curb. If you are familiar with my property, you know that I live on a hill and my driveway is off North Avenue. Fred Standish is the only resident of North Avenue, and he is further up the hill, which I find rather steep. We are obliged to haul our trash and recycle bins to the bottom of the hill to be picked up on Main Road. This process involves loading the bin onto a hand trolley, securing it with bungee cords, gently gliding it down the hill, and hauling the trolley back up the hill, and of course collecting the empty bins later in the day. You can perhaps see why we arthritic, elderly seniors do not choose to do this maneuver on a weekly basis for a few items. And an empty bin is completely absurd, if you'll pardon me. Furthermore, in my case, this past winter was impossible and impassable, as my historic house has no garage and my garbage can and recycle bin were snowbound. I was obliged to collect the tins and bottles in my back entryway until the thaw,
and to haul my weekly trash to the curb in the trunk of my car. My point is that we seniors do recycle, but we do not generate enough items to warrant hauling bins to the curb every week. As diligent taxpayers, we ask little of the town in the way of services. I view the proposed regulations as punitive and unfair to elderly residents. I respectfully request that the Honorable Town Council reconsider these regulations in light of the hardship it would impose on both the elderly and single-person households. Thank you. I have copies of my remarks for the clerk and anyone else who's interested. If anyone has any questions.
My comment would be that if you look at the language, it's clear your practice won't change at all. It says, and I'm quoting, "The town reserves the right to deny collection." It isn't Patriot that's going to show up there some morning and say, "We're not picking up this lady's trash because she doesn't have the bins out." That would have to go through the town. And I think we can all apply some common sense. We know where people live. If you were to make a simple phone call and say, just give the explanation you gave now, under this ordinance amendment, we're certainly not going to deny your collection. And it would have to be a town action. It's not going to be up to the rubbish company to decide on a case-by-case basis. You're perfectly safe. I think we recognize that there are a lot of senior citizens who may not want to put out every single week. They just don't have anything to put out. And if it's just physically difficult, it's something that you can just bring to our attention. But remember that it's not the rubbish people. They're going to pick up until the town contacts them and says, "This lady is abusing the process. Don't pick up her rubbish anymore."
The language, as you just stated, it sounded otherwise. I'm sorry. So perhaps I misunderstood. And the reporting that has been in the Seconic Times and the Newport Daily News have also been more to my understanding was that if you didn't put out a recyclable bin with your trash would not be picked up. That's how it's been reported. That's the only information. And I would like to also amend my remarks in talking to people. Very few people are aware of this proposal. It's not well known.
Well, can I just respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
First, we have been talking about this for over 4 years. And I sat on the council when we talked about this. That was a pay-as-you-throw. But the issue is a town issue. It is trying to extend and helping people out with their future taxes.
I understand
and
that.
It may require some sacrifice by everyone to make this work. And I think Mr. Lambert has tried to address your concerns. But there are a number of elderly people in the town who have spoken to me and have said they have been very supportive with regard to this change of policy, and I have been surprised. But for people who don't know, I don't know what more we can do. We have discussed it at meetings. We're on public access. We're covered in the newspapers, and the conversation has gone on for well over 4 years.
It is one of the frustrations of public service to find out how ill-informed the voters are. I understand that.
Now we're going to advertise for a public hearing.
But please, someone explain to me, are you telling me then that if I put out my garbage, my trash, and do not put out a recyclable bin, my trash will be picked up, and I will not be fined for not having a recyclable bin out?
Well, I believe what Mr. Bellucci, the Director of the Public Works, said was that even if the bin was empty, that something just needs to be there.
But my point in my prepared remarks was that for me and for Fred, who lives further up the hill than I do, to haul down an empty bin on a trolley every week as senior citizens is a hardship, frankly.
Well, I would suggest then that, we'll need to discuss this again, probably at the public hearing. We'll have more input from more of the residents of the town, and that's where really all these comments would be more appropriate.
As an incidental remark, I discussed this with some colleagues at work today. one woman lives in Warwick who also lives alone, and she said the Warwick people specifically asked them not to leave out bins that were partially filled, that it was too costly to pick up a bin that had 1 or 2 empty cans in it. I don't know whether that's an issue that's come up from your point of view.
May I? We have a contract with Patriot, our refuse hauler, and under their contract, they're required every week, to pick up the rubbish and recyclables. It doesn't have to be full, it can be half full, but whatever you put out, they're required by the contract to pick it up. So it wouldn't be more expensive or less expensive than that.
From your point of view?
Well, no, from the contract language that we have with our hauler. They have to make the rounds to every house every week and pick up all the rubbish and all the recycle bins at no cost, more cost or less cost if they aren't there or if they're not there. I mean, it's the same cost.
Madam President, I have a question, a process question for our Director of DPW. How would we handle the situations like at the end of a private road where people now, several houses down the road, bring their trash up to the head of the road? Would that mean that everybody would have to bring their recycling up, or just 2 bins would cover for the whole neighborhood?
As we're doing now, as the new bins are being purchased from DPW, we are putting the addresses on them. So I would envision the only way of handling that would be that all of the bins have to have the addresses on them. And every house that hauls it up to the end of the street would have to have a green bin and a blue bin with their written address on it. So at least we could identify what households are bringing them up and which households aren't. It is going to be a problem. I will not deny that. You know of several locations where several households are bringing their rubbish up to the head of the street, and they're problem areas. And I would think that there's still going to be problem areas. I'm not going to deny that. And there are idiosyncrasies across the whole town, which I think we can address in a particular case of an elderly citizen that can't do it. They can make a phone call to me, and I can make a note of that, pass it on to the rubbish company. We're going to have to address some individual concerns. There are hardships out there, and we do it now. And I think we do it effectively, and we are handling it on a daily basis. This happens, and we make exceptions, and we try to do what we can to make life for our citizens as easy as possible. And the rubbish company has complied. They've been very cooperative in doing a lot of these things, but it is going to be an issue with those people bringing all the stuff up to the end of the streets.
Well, it's an issue only for a while, because the second part of this program would encourage everybody to find recyclables. That is, if we begin a pay-as-you-throw program, you'll have every financial incentive to make sure you're putting all your aluminum cans and all of your newspapers into those recyclable bins. Right now, there isn't that incentive. If we begin with the no bin, no barrel program for a few months, and if we never enact a pay-as-you-throw program, there won't be the incentive. But as you know, what our committee has been doing is considering this as part of a larger plan that would combine both the aspects of the no bin, no barrel with the pay-as-you-throw. That'll be the incentive, Mr. Leonard.
Madam President, excuse me, go ahead.
No, unless there's some sort of a standard established for who will be excused and so forth, how are you going to have everybody in town calling you saying, I'm old and I can't get my rubbish to the curbside? Now, I'm closer to 80 than I am 70, and I have a long driveway, and I put my recyclables out every week. I have a bad heart and I have bad legs, and I get it done. The objective is to allow the landfill to stay open longer so that we can raise the money to cap it. And if we're going to start dispensing permits of some sort that will waive the right to put out your recyclables, what I see some of these old timers doing is saying, well, hell, a couple of cans, I'll just stuck them in with the regular trash, and out it goes. Well, multiply that times the number of seniors in this town, and our purpose for getting into this is going to be defeated.
Excuse me, Mr. Costa, I don't think I've made myself clear. We do recycle. We just find it very difficult and very foolish to try to do it on a weekly basis.
Can you guarantee to me that everybody in your position is going to
I can only
bottles in their hallway?
I have no idea what the rest of the population does. I can only speak for myself, for Mr. Standish and the marshals.
Well, I think that we either accomplish our mission, which is to reduce the filling of the landfill, and the occasional elderly person who can't get their recyclables to the corner, and we have to say, well, which weighs the most? If we think that the senior citizen concern weighs the most, then let's forget this whole program.
We recycle. I support the concept. I support the concept of recycling. I'm just saying that requiring it on a weekly basis is something that I wish the committee would review, because at the end of a month, I have a full bin. It makes sense for me to bring it down.
But it's harder to do at that point, is it not?
No, because...
Wouldn't it be easier to bring down one with a couple of cans in it?
No,
than it is to bring up one full?
wrestling that onto the trolley, and in the winter when it's dark, believe me, once a month is plenty.
Madam President, I've got several other comments, but I think they would be best held to the public hearing, and I would second, I believe it was Ms. Durkee's motion to get advertising so we can have the full public hearing.
Okay, did we?
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Did we come up with a date for the public hearing?
24th of the public hearing.
And I don't know if you want, my thought for an effective date is that the ordinance would become effective on passage, because the ordinance is just having the town reserve the right, and then the actual effective date of the policy, the implementation, would be pursuant to however fast you're able to get the notice out and give people plenty of time on the notice.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to set the public hearing for August the 24th on the draft ordinance amendment for the no bin, no barrel policy. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item of new business is Councilor Costa discussion regarding possible change to fiscal year survey of municipal fiscal years for cities and towns in Rhode Island from town solicitor. Mr. Costa?
Yeah. I have not done an awful lot of research on this because I'm not an attorney, but I was hoping that if we're doing anything wrong, the solicitor will advise us of such. My thought is to continue to change the fiscal year from 1 July, 30 June. I would like to see it changed to 1 January, 31 December, but if we're going to have a financial town meeting a month and a half before that, we're going to be involved in all the holidays of Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. So I would be more than happy to say that maybe we should change our fiscal year from 1 November to 30 October, or 31 October. And the purpose for that change is based on what has happened around here year after year after year when we're preparing budgets and when we're facing a financial town meeting. The discussion usually goes, how much are we getting from the state? The state was providing aid to the municipality as well as to the school department. And it would be good to have those numbers before we began debating the budget and approving a budget. And that's the primary reason for my suggestion. There may be others who agree for different reasons, or there may be those that disagree. But my proposal is to prepare an ordinance for public hearing that will change our fiscal year to from July to June to November to October. And I would like to hear other comments.
Hannibal, I don't think we can do it by ordinance. I think we have to go and seek state legislation and then authorize us to send out tax bills on a different, on a 15-month or maybe a 16-month period, on the short year. But I do think that we need to think through, one, how the auditors look at this. Two, the budget committee would be then sitting throughout the summer. Three, we'd be having a financial town meeting in probably late September. So those are the things that immediately jump out at me as sort of getting some input, because having budget committees sit as they do in the wintertime when it's snowing outside, it's very different than having them sit on hot summer days or nights at the town hall.
Place is air conditioned, Louise.
It is? It's news to me.
It's right up there, Louise, near the
Yeah,
door.
you feel it?
It's not on, I don't believe it.
But I do think that that is I mean, I think we need some input from others too. How we get that, I'm not sure. But certainly the auditors could be contacted.
Hopefully, Madam President, hopefully the auditors wouldn't care. They just audit what's there. But I do agree with Ms. Durfee that there are other ramifications. That being said, you know, we frequently sit around and talk about the fact, well, it's very frustrating trying to put a budget together when we don't know what the state is going to do, so on and so forth. So I see some merit to it, but it will be a little bit tricky. There are a lot of things. The last Charter Review Commission started to look at this, and we abandoned that because there were so many ramifications, and that there were other things we felt were more important. So I think it has value, but I agree with the fact that we need to look at it carefully. And there's always the counterpoint that, well, even if the General Assembly allocates money, there's nothing that says they may not withdraw it, as they've been doing recently. You know, it's sort of a, now you see it, now you don't. But I still think that at least their exploration has merit.
Yeah, and maybe simultaneously, I know that Louise, you had brought up last budget preparation season that maybe it's just a matter of postponing the financial town meeting.
Yeah.
So maybe, you know, dealing with both those things simultaneously, you know, in the context.
Since this is a local matter, why do we need the state's approval?
No, it is.
Just because if you look through this particular compilation, which I didn't do, by the way, but I was able to find it on the state archives. Tiverton happens to be one of those places that our fiscal year is set in a public law back in 1962. Somebody did it that way before you had a charter. So we would have to get the General Assembly to amend that public law. It's not a big deal, but it would have to be done before you could do it. I guess that's the good news is you wouldn't have to necessarily deal with it in the charter.
Yeah, the charter can only be amended, we only amend it, we'd have to have an election to amend it. And we usually only do it, you know, during an election year, which is every 2 years. Whereas with an ordinance, you can adjust it more often, and yet it's not too easy to change.
Well, obviously, we would ask the General Assembly to allow the town council to change it by ordinance.
Well, that would be great.
But it's really a policy decision. This provides, as you can see from this, most all of the towns have
July 1st.
July 1st. East Providence is the one that mainly sticks out in the different one.
I read that whole list, really, and I noted that most of them, almost all of them are July 1st. But that doesn't mean We can't be different.
Not at all. It's up
But
to
there's a
you.
process in which to do it.
I'm just commenting on the legal part of how to do it. Whether to do it or not is up for you people to decide what to
The
do.
only thing that troubles me is Louise's comment that they'll be sitting here all summer, and I don't know how that would work. But as I say, it is air conditioned. and we
More
have our
townspeople
meetings
might
all year
attend.
round. Beg your pardon?
More townspeople might attend.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Well, I think the question then for tonight is, shall we petition the general legislature to allow us to amend our fiscal year by ordinance? And then we can decide whether we want to change it or not, and we at least can.
Would that require a public hearing as well?
No,
No?
to request that the legislature,
No, I mean, to the point of,
no, not if they granted the authority to do it by ordinance.
I get a little bit worried about that time frame with elections. Primaries could be going on during that time, and, the
Yeah.
elections, it's also a kind of a busy time at that point to put a financial town meeting right in September, when, that could be primaries and stuff. I'm just saying that September date, if you're thinking of.
No, that's a good thought. I did not give that any thought.
I'm just raising.
But every other year, you have a problem with elections.
yeah.
Hannibal, can I make a suggestion that perhaps we ask the town clerk to send out a letter to, particularly the budget committee, this, with regard to the proposal of changing the, just as you said. And who else should we, we asked the treasurer to ask, if there's any auditing problems that anybody perceives.
The budget committee, I wouldn't, maybe the treasurer can get an inquiry
And
as to what
before
his
we
thoughts are.
take any action, to sort of get some input, let the town administrator think his way through that, because it's gonna mean a very, sort of a,
I'd go with that. Everybody
Yeah,
else
just
is
get
in
the other
support.
people who would be involved in it and at least have some input.
The only other suggestion I would make is that in view of the fact East Providence already has a different fiscal year, maybe Mr. Tights could contact their legal counsel or someone appropriate in East Providence and find out whether there are any practical problems.
Well, unfortunately, as we've seen in the news, that later date hasn't helped their budget any.
No, but there may be other practical problems, such as with auditing and the like, practical problems that we're just not aware of. Now, the fact they haven't changed, it would seem that they've lived with it, but at least check into that.
and the other alternative is to seek to change the financial town meeting.
Yeah,
And
that's what I'm saying.
As Joanne pointed out.
We would also have to amend our charter in some way, because the charter specifies the May date of the financial town meeting.
Yes.
Yep.
And everything
So-
flows
From there.
to that.
Yep.
So we'd probably be looking at the General Assembly and a
Charter.
charter amendment.
Yep.
For sure, we would end up with a charter and then to change the date of the financial town meeting.
All right, send a letter and
See what comes out of it. Yep. Okay.
We could go forward after we get the General Assembly's okay to do it by ordinance. We could go with a very inexpensive one polling place election if we had to amend the charter. We could have this as the polling place and anywhere else. Anyone interested in voting could go to that polling place.
Mr. Robert? Oh, I'm sorry, Hannibal, will you finish?
No, that's fine.
I'm sorry, I was in the back room, so I'm not sure if this has been covered, but in order to do something like that, which actually I would be in favor of, there could be a substantial financial side of this also if you're delaying a fiscal year by 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, well, Louise did mention about the 15-month tax bill.
Yes, I think you'd have to get General Assembly authority to send out a short year. Situate did this last, and I have the act in which they did. They petitioned the General Assembly and sought legislative approval for tax purposes.
Mhm.
It's set up quarterly. You'd have to have a short
Right.
fiscal year.
Because outside of that, when I worked for the town of Cumberland, they were toying with the idea of changing, because they're actually unsynchronized. I believe their fiscal year is 1 year in arrears. So they were talking about trying to bring their fiscal year current and doing something similar to East Providence. And they were talking about floating some bonds, and they were millions of dollars, so just wanted to bring that to your attention.
That would get everybody's attention, wouldn't it?
Okay, so I guess the general consensus is then that the town clerk will send a letter to the budget committee and any other people that might participate in.
Maybe the assessor would be a good person
Yep,
too.
the assessor.
I'm sure the treasurer would be
Treasurer.
interested in the matter.
I already got the treasurer, the administrator, I'll add the assessor. Yep, the budget committee, the board of canvas, and so on and so on. Anyone I can, I'll get the information back to you, and as soon as they respond, I'll put it back on the agenda.
Okay.
Madam President, if I could ask the town solicitor a question.
Go ahead.
Mr. Tights, would that also affect the school committee?
Yes.
Yeah, the school committee
Yeah.
would move with the rest of the town.
So you'd have to ask the school committee also?
Yes. The school department.
School department.
Certainly would
Whether
affect
we have
them.
to ask them or whether we have to inform them. that
Well,
we're
we could
doing
ask
it.
for their input. I mean, I'm sure they have some, you know,
They might prefer it too.
yeah.
Just that these bureaucratic processes.
Let me resend something out.
I guess he doesn't seem like he's
I wonder
part
it
of
takes
it.
2 years to pass an ordinance.
Okay,
We can move on to the next item.
all right.
You got the draft no-bid thing in a week, in 1 week.
That's right, that's right. Look it. All right. Moving on to the next item is Councilor Leonard requests town administrator provide report including a schedule of forthcoming department head and annual evaluations per town charter, section 503. Councilor Leonard.
Thank you, Madam President. There's really, what was behind this, even though I cite that particular section of the charter, there's another section that says that when it's time to renew contracts, the town council has to approve new contracts. And the thought struck me that I'd been on the council for 7+ months and hadn't seen any reviews, and that eventually we're going to be asked to make a judgment on new contracts. And I thought it would be very helpful to have an idea of how well the various department heads are performing, which led to the section 503, paragraph 7 comment. But I'm really thinking ahead to those times when we have to make a judgment to approve or not approve new contracts, which I think there's going to be a few of those coming up in the not-too-distant future.
The evaluations have not been performed at this point. Reason being, I was not overseeing the department heads long enough to feel comfortable evaluating their performance. But I will be the administrator coming up on a year, so it's now time. You're absolutely correct.
Okay. And that's my main motivation, is just to
Just to get the dialogue.
Get the information flow going, because, again, the main thing is at the point we'll have to pass on the new contracts. So if that's in work, I would be satisfied with that.
Okay. Okay, you can move on to the next item, which is Council Leonard again, requests scheduling a meeting to evaluate methods and procedures of council operations to identify possible improvements.
I have a fundamental professional belief in continuous improvement, and that's part of the spirit of this. I should also hasten to mention that this is not an original idea with me. I think in the past, Ms. Durfee has commented about perhaps a workshop or a retreat would be focusing on governance would be a good thing. And I know in the past, Mr. Tights has also suggested it. So at 7+ months into the process, I just wanted to raise this issue for other people to think about. For example, one thing that I would view as an improvement, and other people may not agree, is that prior administrators issued weekly reports about what was going on. Some were weekly, some were bi-weekly. I personally would like to see a little more information from the administrator, speaking only as one person. So again, I'm thinking that this might be an opportunity to follow up on several different people's suggestions in the past, and at least float the idea and see whether there's any enthusiasm for it, or do we think we're doing okay?
Well, I know, I think probably it's always useful, I think, to have sort of set aside some time just to say what works, what isn't working, how can we improve the governance. So I would certainly support having a workshop and just having it's very useful to have that frank conversation with each other.
So are we gonna, we have a motion to maybe set a governance workshop?
I would make
Let's
that.
not make it, may I suggest that we don't have it in the hot summer, please?
Now, Hannibal, you're gonna doom the budget committee to a hot summer.
Yeah.
You were
Perhaps.
prepared to do that.
Perhaps we could arrange the workshop to be held somewhere where there's a little bit more air conditioning or some such. But I would ask Madam Clerk to take a look at the schedule to see when we might have another workshop coming in. Whether, I don't know whether it'd be good to have it just the sole topic. If we've got to get together, it's usually better to have at least a couple items to have some efficiency.
August 31st would be your next Monday month. Tentative workshop, or, you know,
That's the, yeah, tentatively reserved.
So I would make a motion that we schedule a workshop for August 31st to at least have one agenda item of governance.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lambert. Okay, we have.
Another question?
Sure.
I would take Mr. Leonard's suggestion that we have more than one item for the agenda to have a workshop.
The opportunity will probably
Yeah.
present itself.
Should it rise, then, yeah, that's usually,
happens to be the 5 Monday month.
We've only been here 7 months. The big problems are yet to come, such as changing the fiscal year and a few others.
I'll be ready by that workshop.
okay. So we have a motion and a second to set August 31st as the governance workshop, and for any other item that could be applicable for that date as a workshop. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed? 1. The motion carries. And next item is Councilor Leonard, annual evaluation process for town administrator per town charter, section 407.
And Madam Chairman, as the administrator has just noted, he's in the position of having be due for his annual review. And what I've done is have raised that issue, and then Madam Clerk was good enough to attach a copy of previous performance evaluation forms. Again, this is not my form. This has been in existence for some time, but I thought it would be good to bring this forward so new members of the council that have never seen it would have an opportunity to review it, update it. We can all do that. It's worked in the past, and the process is quite straightforward. Each council member gives a rating. They're all forwarded. In the past, they've all been forwarded to the town clerk, who compiles it and comes up with a arithmetic consensus, and then the group reviews that to see if the arithmetic makes sense. So I would propose that the first step is to have all members of the council look at this prior form and see whether that makes sense. And I would also say, if the administrator has had a chance to look at it, to see if there was anything in this rather comprehensive form that he would like to add or perhaps feels is not necessarily apropos, so that we can have some consensus around what is a reasonable basis to evaluate its performance. So I would open the floor to other councilors to see if they've had a chance, whether they want more time, or how best to proceed.
Any comments?
This is not a difficult process. I would suggest you simply pick a date, a drop dead date for getting the forms to the clerk. I think that's all that's required. Unless, Jim, do you need some time to review that list? Have you looked at it?
No, I haven't had the opportunity to look at it yet.
We want to give you a chance to.
How about Councilor Lambert, Councilor Roderick? Have
Well,
you?
I think obviously an evaluation, is due, but I think that we owe it to our administrator to give him the opportunity to review this, to see if there are any comments. He may feel that there are questions here that might be omitted, that things that might need to be added. There are certain aspects of his job that may not be addressed in here that you may want to at least enlighten us on. I would like to set a date at our next council meeting after we receive any comments from other councilmen, council people, or the administrator before we set a drop dead date for the evaluation. That's a motion.
Fine. We do have to keep in mind the charter.
That was a
Did you say
motion?
that was a motion?
That was a motion. So
Should we ask him to repeat it? No.
The administrator did get a copy of the evaluation, by the way.
He hasn't had a chance to
Back in,
review it, though.
same.
He's a pretty busy guy. So I think the intent of the motion is to give him until our next meeting to review it, and see if there are any comments, and then at the next meeting, we'll set a drop dead date to get the evaluations.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's the
So
intent.
I'll second Mr. Roderick's motion.
Okay.
And then any council member that wants to make changes, additions, deletions could also be ready at the next meeting. And we'll go from there. Okay.
Now, I just have one comment that, when I worked in business, no one ever got to see the evaluation of themselves, what the tool would be before the evaluation would take place.
Madam President, I've worked in organizations where they've done both, where the evaluation is a set of guidelines. That it tells them exactly what they are going to be evaluated on, and then when you're in a position, those guidelines are set forth, so they know what they're going to be evaluated on. Because it's hard to and performance from the charter.
Yeah.
Well, the annual review is
Yeah.
from the charter.
Right.
Can I also say that it would give the council an opportunity, if this is help for the next one, if you have any additional questions. We also had used some other community evaluation forms when this was compiled together before. So if you have any questions you would like to see added to this, I guess if Mr. Constable also wants to add a question to his evaluation, I guess I would take them all and put them together.
At the risk of lapsing into the jargon, this is sort of a super MBO program, management by objective program, where certainly in that approach, the person being evaluated is aware of what the objectives of the organization are, and they get to partake in the discussion about what their role is going to be. I've worked both ways, but I prefer the more open system where everybody knows what is going on.
Okay, so we have a motion, and do we have a second?
I think Mr. Lambert made
Okay.
a second.
Mr. Durfee had already seconded.
Okay,
Somebody did.
all right. Okay, we have a motion and a second to continue this to the next meeting.
And to receive any
Comments
additional-
or additions or omissions. Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, next item is Tiverton Police Department Chief Blakey request approval to advertise and establish a list of potential police officers. Good night, Chief.
Madam President, members of the council, we currently have one vacancy of patrol position, and I've been told on July 3rd that there's another member going to be leaving the force. He's going back into a private business, and it's going to create 2 vacancies. I'm actually concerned about pending overtime or possible overtime, so I'd like to establish a list and actually hire some people to fill these vacancies.
I'll make a motion that the town establish we first advertise and prepare a list of potential police officers from whom hiring should be made.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion.
May I ask how long the list would be?
It would be
How
good.
long the list you intend to
It would be
get out?
good for 2 years.
Now, how many people will be on the list?
Depends how many applicants we have, sir. But,
If there are 100 applicants, we're going to have a list with 100 names on it?
no, there'll be a testing procedure, there'll be advertising, whoever applies. I'll be honest with you, I'd actually be looking for people because of the situation with the available officers already trained. They would probably be given a shot. That'd be save us some training money, some academy money. To give you a flat number, we probably have a list of 10. I don't anticipate 10 vacancies over the next 2 years. Is that the question you?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions?
Is there a motion on the floor?
Yes.
Yes.
The motion is to approve the request? I'd like to limit the number of people on the list, Chief.
Okay,
I'd say limit it to the top 10.
that's possible. There's no problem with that.
Well,
Mr. Costa, I don't believe you can limit a list when you go out on an advertising, because what you're telling, you might as well just advertise only the top 10 people who are, these people, need apply.
we do it all the time. We limit our consideration list to 3.
No, we do, but in advertising, what I'm saying, I mean, if he only
No,
gets...
I'm not saying we're going to advertise 10 positions. We're going to advertise police officer positions.
Correct.
Then the
So
personnel
what-
board.
But he may only get 1 applicant, or he may get 100. And that's what I'm saying, you cannot limit, telling him right from the start that he can only choose 10, the top 10 out of it.
Why can't I?
No, I'm just saying, I don't believe that that's fair and equitable in advertising an open position. You're limiting him before he, even gets started.
You think 10 is limiting him?
Yes, in this particular environment. I mean, right now, I'm sure that there are police officers across the state that I'm sure that he's gonna get more than 10 applicants.
Fall River, I believe, just laid off 45 officers.
And they're
We're
going to
looking
take
for
an
jobs.
8%.
Yeah, and they're gonna take an 8% cut.
Pay
So,
cut.
I mean, I'm saying, I believe, if 100 people, let them all advertise, so then we can pick the best of the best.
Excuse me if I may, there's a procedure, there's a written exam, there's a psychological exam, there's oral boards, there's a procedure before you go, not counting before we actually get to the personnel board, who would limit their list, that I believe that would address your question, to a respectable number.
So it would be the process as it would have been any other time.
Correct.
Well, let's see how it develops. At least you're only asking to advertise.
Right.
My question is how many on the list maybe is
Well, we
not
won't know.
appropriate at this point in
Right.
time.
Well, I would like to try, because of the time frame, it usually takes approximately just under a year to get an officer ready. If we're fortunate enough to get someone's academy trained, that will stop the academy segment, but we still have to field train the person, extensive background check, and we don't want to be getting officers that were discarded from another agency. We'd actually do a careful background check, should we get an academy applicant, an academy-trained applicant, so.
Fine.
So any applicant that could come from Massachusetts wouldn't do the academy?
They have to do the constitutional law and the criminal law aspect of the academy. It's still
Okay,
required.
to understand the laws of, okay.
Well, actually, Rhode Island law,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay,
Constitutional law is the same.
yes.
Okay.
Last time we looked. Thank you. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor of the approval to advertise and establish a list of potential police officers, please raise your right hand. That's unanimous. Thank you, Chief. The next item is James Ware, Meeting House, Main Road, request for review of signage in Historic District. Mr. Ware?
Thank you. I guess my first question, my name is James Weir. I live at 26 River Road in Westport, but I own several properties at Tiverton, Four Corners. Have each of you received one of these
Yes.
packages?
Yes.
I think it's somewhat self-explanatory. I also wrote a motion to defer on this. I was cited for having two signs that didn't comply with the sign ordinance. And that was apparently, nobody filed a complaint, so that was done by the building official on his own as a consequence of the other sign dispute down the road. So I looked at the broader issue of signs in the entire historic district and basically came to the conclusion that there's no properties at Four Corners that meet the sign requirements, and therefore, in my opinion, something is wrong with the sign ordinance. It is further exacerbated by a problem of nonconformity, insofar as about 50% of the commercial buildings at Tiverton Four Corners are nonconforming, and that leads to different rules within the historic district. So I think ultimately the important thing actually is to look at the historic district also, and that's something that has been avoided over the years. Right now, the village commercial zone did attempt to institute some design review into the process, but currently something like 80% of the property in the historic district is not covered by the design review. So from all kinds of levels, if you look at the historic importance of the Tiverton Four Corners Historic District, if you look at the commercial fabric and the economic importance of Tiverton Four Corners, something's not right.
Does anybody have any questions or
Did you say
comments?
you have drafted an ordinance that would cover the situation?
I haven't done that, no.
Oh, I thought I heard you say that.
No.
If we don't have any public comments, I'd like to make a motion. And the motion would be that the zoning board defer action on all sign cases within the Tiverton Four Corners Historic District until such time as the Tiverton Town Council with the planning board can review and possibly amend the signed ordinance covering that area in a way that will be more harmonious with the historic character of the district, as well as being compatible with the economic and cultural interests of that area of the town.
Madam President?
Mr. Costa?
I live down there.
Oh,
in
could we just
South
have a
Tiverton.
second so we can have discussion?
Second motion.
Thank you, Nancy.
I was about to second it. I'm just giving you my reason for seconding it.
Oh, okay.
In any case, I live in South Tiverton too, and I'm in favor of the motion. I am going to second it. My only thought is, I'm sure you've looked around the area that you're concerned with, and do you think that something could be done to improve either the appearance, or could there be standards of some sort that, in other words, I haven't gone by there now in some time, at least not to look at the sign, usually I'm driving.
Yeah.
I'm getting old, so I gotta watch the road. But when I have looked, there were some that maybe need to be replaced, that need to resemble the purpose for which that corner exists, you know. I don't know if you've done anything like that, evaluating some condition of the signs.
Just to respond to that, I think in general, the look of Tiverton Four Corners is vastly improved over where it was 20 years ago. I think it is a matter somewhat tied to economics. If the businesses there are healthy, they'll spruce themselves up. If they're under the weather, things are going to deteriorate. And I think one of the things I'm trying to convey to the people of Tiverton and to the town council and the people of Tiverton is, I think that Four Corners needs support. I think that it is something that economically can help the town of Tiverton, but we also need support in many ways for things like sidewalk improvements, plans like that. And I think that will help I think that if the businesses are more healthy, they have more, first of all, they'll pay more money in sales taxes, and I also think that helps people improve the general look of the place.
You know, it's a laudable goal, but I have some issues, and I'd like some of them to be addressed by the solicitor. But what happens if we take an affirmative vote and defer sign ordinance, and a year goes by before somebody comes up with an ordinance proposal? And in the meantime, one of the enterprising puts up a flashing, hey, eat at Joe's, or have coconut ice cream at Gray's. And I'd like to know if we've deferred enforcement of the whole issue, where we are on that. And then I have a follow-up question, Mr. Solicitor. Let's assume there is a proposal that everybody agrees to on signs, but some of these signs have been there for years. A sign ordinance will not have a retroactive effect, I believe. So those signs stay there, and we have a new ordinance. So address those issues, please.
Well, first of all, the council, as far as bringing future actions, the council doesn't really have that authority.
Right.
This is in the hands of the zoning enforcement officer. The town administrator can direct the zoning enforcement officer not to enforce certain things. That's within our governmental discretion. But the council doesn't have that ability to interfere with that level of the government. While the council can request it, I think the council can request the administrator to ask the enforcement officer not to do it, and the council could request the zoning board to continue the case. It doesn't have the power to continue it. The only way you'd be able to actually create that would be if you had a moratorium. And you've had experience as council with moratoriums. I mean, you need to have a crisis that comes on you suddenly without warning, and then you need to have a plan to solve it. You need to have a short period of time. And I don't think that this meets, it doesn't meet the requirement to begin with of something that's come upon you suddenly without any warning, creating a crisis. I'm sympathetic to the question. I mean, this is one of the things that I think, should be looked at. It may well be that the zoning is inappropriate for the, that it may be that the signage zoning is inappropriate. It may also be that a lot of the base zoning for Tiverton Four Corners is appropriate, and I know that's something that should be looked at. But I don't think the council has the authority. To answer your follow-up question, if the ordinance was to be amended with signs, anything that was there that was non-conforming, that was legally non-conforming, would be able to stay. If it was illegally non-conforming, if it had been put up since the previous ordinance had been adopted and just put up illegally, that would not change unless the new ordinance legalized it. But you could have a combination of legal and illegal signs there. You would basically have to get people to agree. If they had a legal non-conforming sign, you have to get them to agree to voluntarily change it. Or you could put some sort of amortization position in the ordinance where if you figure the lifetime of the sign is 20 years and give them 20 years in which to correct the sign and bring it into conformance, that would be the other way to do it. But it wouldn't be immediate.
Right.
Can we, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I guess my thinking on that had been, and I'm not quite sure I completely understood his response, was that all of the existing signs would be deferred and that any new sign would have to conform with the ordinance, so that you wouldn't get flashing signs, you wouldn't get now. So I think that...
Well, I'm talking about the interim period.
Well, no, during the interim period, there wouldn't be any change of sign. I mean, if there was a change of a sign, I mean, all the existing signs could stay up. If there was a change of a sign or a new sign, that would have to comply with the ordinance as it's written. I don't think that's a question, but I guess I'm trying to figure out how can 25 signs that don't conform, I mean, first of all, there's a problem with how does the building inspector selectively enforce the issue or not selectively enforce it? And, you know, or is there a way that we can appeal all of them to the zoning board and not have everybody spend $650 to do it? And you know, also you have every merchant at Four Corners is sitting there in peril worrying about his sign, you know. I mean, that's another practical problem.
Well, can we just modify the motion that I made to put it in the form of a request to the town administrator? That he make a request to the appropriate personnel in the town to defer enforcement for at least a 3-month period.
And I think it should be limited only to signs existing.
Existing, relating, yep, that's a good point, existing signs. My concern is if Mr. Ware is correct, I guess we could take the draconian step of sending someone down there and ripping all of the signs down and managing somehow to destroy all of the businesses down there. I mean, I don't think that's the direction we're going. And if Mr. Ware is correct, this is obviously an issue that we have to address at some point, but I'd hate to be addressing it while these people are depending on these next 2 months probably to make their living.
I mean, the sign ordinance, I can tell you, in the district, in the historic, it will be a year before an appropriate sign that everybody agrees to will be in place. I must say, I do not think it's a good policy for the town council to undertake to direct the administrator to defer enforcement on anything, because you won't be the first person that appears before us, and I think it's a very bad precedent. And I have to say that. And I understand your issues, Mr. Ware, but I can see popping up all over town inequities on this zoning violation. I think it's bad public policy.
Madam President, I believe that this belongs in planning and zoning.
Yes.
It does not belong in front of the council
At this point, no.
And it's unfortunate, you know, the signage at Tiverton Four Corners has become a flashpoint all of a sudden. Those of us who have lived in town all their lives and those of us who are new to town, as long as I can remember driving through Tiverton Four Corners, 90% of those signs have been there and haven't changed. There are new ones, obviously, a few new ones. But again, I firmly believe that this is a zoning and a planning issue, and that's where it should lie. I don't think we should be directing any other department in town to defer enforcement. I mean, the law is the law, and let them petition the proper department to ask for a variance if that's what they're looking for, and go from there.
I will move the question, then allow the vote to go forward. It was a
Well,
motion and second.
I'll renew my motion.
Would you express it again, because I think you've made a change in it.
Well,
Change.
Changed it in the sense that, based on Mr. Teitz's suggestion and concerns, that the resolution that I initially proposed be treated as a request to Mr. Gonzalo as town administrator, to ensure that there will be that we'll defer enforcing any of the signage ordinances that might apply to Four Corners at this point, at least for the next 3 months, so that the zoning board, the planning board, can take a look at the whole issue, and eventually the town council as well if necessary. My concern is, and I understand what Ms. Durfee is saying here, but if Mr. Ware is correct, I mean, is there any reason why one of our inspectors couldn't demand every one of those signs be taken down tomorrow morning? I'm sure that's not going to happen, but I'd like to give the people out there at Four Corners who have enough of a problem making a living, I'm sure, in some of those small businesses, that at least they'll get through the next couple of months without any interference from a town inspector.
Well, I just want to clarify, I mean, unless it's an immediate public health and safety hazard, we don't do any of that as far as ordering people to take something down immediately. They're given a notice of violation, sometimes they're given a warning first, they're given a notice of violation, time to comply, and the opportunity to appeal. So,
but there's cause, you know what that is.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, we have far worse situations in town with people out of compliance with the zoning and flaunting the ordinance, that we take a more considered approach and try to work with people to arrive at solutions. So I don't want people in general who are watching this on TV to think that we're always out there. In general, we only go after things that are either blatant or we receive a complaint to begin with, and then there's a whole process that it goes through. So no one's going to have it happen to be ordered to remove it tomorrow. Unless if somebody put a sign out there tonight right on the very edge of the road that blocked visibility and was a safety hazard, yes, then we would come in and order them to remove it immediately. And if it was a real safety hazard, we might remove it ourselves immediately. But
Yeah.
short of that, it won't happen.
That's not really my concern. I guess it's reading the paper and seeing one complaint, and I'm not critical of it. I mean, people have a right to complain if they don't feel an ordinance is being applied properly. But then you read of, people have spent over $20,000 in attorney's fees on that one issue. I think we can suffer through the next couple of months with nothing but a recommendation to the town council, to the town administrator. Let's do nothing and let these people be comfortable for a couple of months.
Well, I think that's a good sentiment, and I agree with that portion of it. But again, I think that this is not the council's area. There are set procedures when there are signage issues, and that's the avenue that needs to be followed. By directing the town administrator, even to ask them, we're saying that we are going to defer enforcement of town laws. That is not our job. Our job is to enforce.
Right, and what would preclude somebody from Bliss Four Corners coming in to do the same thing? So then we would have almost every pocket of the town that has these same issues.
Nothing's going to happen in the next 2 months.
Yeah, and
I
also,
hope.
it won't be confined to signs. There will be people who will say, something is being enforced, we have the problems all the time. For us to do this and think it's going to be limited,
no,
we're kidding ourselves. This is, as I said, bad public policy.
Yes, Mr.
Can I think, is there a way, I'm just trying to find a creative solution to this, because I understand the argument about the council and its role, and that you need to enforce the law. So I do understand that, and I don't take that lightly. But I'm just wondering if there is a way that perhaps the Four Corners Merchants Association can appeal to the zoning board with sort of one appeal and not have every merchant appealing to the zoning board separately. I mean, to me, that would be an equitable way to do it if there could be one collective appeal and perhaps with an argument before the zoning board, and this would be only the existing signs that we're talking about, but it would be to go to the zoning board with a collective appeal. I don't know. I'm trying to mitigate the problem. We do have a lot of businesses there that are really on the ropes, and I've had 3 businesses close already. And others have told me if they can't get through the summer that they've got to do something drastic. So the Four Corners that you see today may not be the Four Corners. I'm not trying to say that it's reality. I can show you some of the sales statistics that have dropped off enormously.
This is true throughout the country.
I understand that.
And this council has urged people, shop locally, whether it's the Four Corners or North Cleveland, etc. I exhort people, get sandwiches at the appropriate, and that's not the issue. The economy is not something this town council created.
Right.
But things are, I think Ed Roderick has a point. And I think for us to do this would be folly, because it won't be confined to you, and it will not be confined to the Four Corners or Village Commercial. We'll have this across the board, asking for deferment of this enforcement or that enforcement. So I'm going to move the question.
Great, thanks again.
It's on Mr.
We do have a motion on the floor by Mr. Lambert, and I believe a second by Mr. Costa, to instruct the town administrator to request, I'm sorry, to, please repeat it again, that's like, to defer the outcome of the actions against, with the sign ordinance in the Tiverton Four Corners Historic District. Is that it? Kind of, sort of?
Let's defer enforcement.
Enforcement, okay.
For 3 months.
All right.
And as to existing signs, right?
As to existing.
Enforcement for 3 months to existing signs. All those in favor of that motion, please raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3. Against? 3. The motion fails. Thank you. The next item is bids and requests for proposals. Town administrator request bid award for animal shelter services to Secana Veterinary Hospital.
Councilors, we went out to advertise for a new contract for the next 3 years, and as you see in your backup, we only received 1 response. Just a little briefing on what that means. We have $33,000 budgeted for this. The reason why it came in lower is because we reduced the kennels from 8 to 6, and we did that based on usage. But it does allow us, or the proposal does allow us to use additional kennels at the same rate. So therefore, we won't be paying for them every day of the year and have them empty. So we find that that was a cost-effective measure. In addition to the fact that that budget usually contains additional services by the veterinarian. If an animal comes in and it's injured and has to be bandaged or something, there are some dollars there to take care of those issues. So I would ask that you authorize us to make this award.
So move.
Is there a second? Discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion to award this bid to Secundit Veterinary Hospital, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Okay, next, Town Administrator announcements, comments, and questions.
I would like to announce that the Tax Board of Review is looking for a volunteer. So if anyone is aware or anyone is interested in becoming a volunteer on the Tax Board of Review, please submit an application to me. Second, an update on the Bugamash Park. We had a meeting set with a representative from DEM on 7/8. 10 minutes before the meeting, he called and indicated that he would be unable to make it. We rescheduled the meeting for Friday, July 10th. The individual did not show for the meeting. I have attempted to contact him, leave voice messages, and sent him an email this morning trying to reschedule. Currently the grant we have for $18,000, the wording in the grant indicates that the grant expires in June 2008. He has verbally indicated that it would be extended to 2010. We are attempting to get a letter to that fact. We also wanted to review the billing that we have, which we have expended $30,000 on that park at this point, either through actual expenditures or in kind effort. So we want to review that so that we can get reimbursement of $15,000, 50%, so that we can use it to further advance the project. We also wanted to talk to DEM about increasing the grant from the $18,000 that we currently have to a projected $40,000 that they had indicated would be available. We wanted to take the DEM on a tour of the recreation facility so that they could see the work being performed. The Recreation Committee has refocused and are attempting to set the 2 basketball courts in motion, and a private group will be looking into the skate park. Audit of our records as of June 30. We have been told that our submission is okay, and we're simply waiting for approval at this point. The Auditor General has been out of the country and has returned. I would expect approval to make this award within the next 2 weeks. A school update. We have received the keys to the 2 schools, the Old Ranger and Nonquit. We received those this past week. We took a tour of the 2 buildings. The 2 buildings have been cleaned and broom swept, and they are in good shape from that standpoint. This week we have taken the electricity and the insurance and changed the responsibility to the town rather than the school department. The electric estimate that we have for Nonquit as it stands would be approximately $150 per month, and Ranger would be $275 per month. The insurance is, as stated before, for Nonquit $1,611, for Ranger $2,346. The immediate issue that we have is grass mowing, and we will be working on that. The Senior Center. On August the 5th, which is a Wednesday, there will be a driver safety program for people over the age of 50. This will be in conjunction with AARP. If anyone is interested in attending, they should contact the Senior Center at 625-6790. A website for the Tiverton Economic Development. The Chamber of Commerce has hired John Flanders to develop the website for EDC, and within 45 days, we should have a product to review. And this will also include pamphlets to be issued. Congressman Kennedy's office has informed us that the House Finance Services Appropriations Bill includes $80,000 for the industrial park, and that'll come to us through the Newport Chamber of Commerce, and that'll happen later on in the year. We have a Hambley Road radio tower that we will be receiving 2 grants, one for FY09 for approximately $2,100 and one for FY10 for $2,400, which is going to assist us in paying the electricity for that tower. This is something new. We've never received money before. Regarding street lights, about half of the street lights that we listed have been turned off, and they're working on the rest of them. I left on your places a memorandum from the fire department that we would like to, I'm not going to read it. You have it so you can read it, but I just want to mention the names. The Kingston Fire District, South Kingston, lost its Assistant Chief, Alan LePage, through an unfortunate accident. And I'd like to give recognition to our firefighters who assisted on their own time and at no cost to the town, assisted covering shifts and honor God, so on and so forth. You have the memorandum. I just want to read the names. I will just read the last names to make it quicker. But Michael Donovan, Mark Reimels, Bruce Reimels, Placica, Murphy, Mello, White, Peliquin, Ferreira, Brandemeyer. The next one's a tough one.
Panitia.
I'm sorry?
Panitia.
Panitia, Andrade, Sheehan, and Lynch. We'd just like to extend our appreciation for the effort that they contributed. Tiverton Land Trust is going to be having a fundraiser. It's called Summer's Eve at Farrowbank Farm. It's going to be on July 23rd, and it'll be between 6 and 9 p.m. And my last announcement is tax collection summary. At this point, after the 10 days after the quarter, okay, this is, prepaid plus the first 10 days. Last year, we collected 26.41% of our levy. This year, we collected 25.73% of the levy. So there was 0.68% less collected of our levy this year, which amounts to about $219,000, which is not too bad considering the economy. That's all I have. Thank you.
Madam President, I have one follow-up question. When you talk about the $80,000 grant that Congressman Kennedy mentioned, was that an actual past allocation, or was that just a proposal in committee?
It's proposal.
Jim, on the audit approval, that then should be on our agenda for next, to approve the bid?
I would say so.
Okay, thank you. Next is council announcements, comments, or questions? Anyone?
Yes, when would you see us receiving, this is a question for the treasurer, when would we be receiving the year-end reports?
We're working...
Excuse me, Ms. DiMatteo, could I ask you to come to the table, please, so we can hear you? Thank you.
We should be receiving, we've drafted the revenue today, which we have shared with the town administrator, we look like we're going to be on target for probably the next meeting. We should have a close to final draft. So I'm looking forward to having that in your packets for the next town meeting. Not final, because there's always adjustments at the end of the year. One other comment, if I could make, relevant to the audit. I spoke to Mr. Almonte today, the Auditor General, and he assured me the fact that our submission was timely, but there was some paperwork on the selected group that we had chosen that they had to complete and fill out. But he assured me that that would be coming verbally today, as soon as possible. That's your question.
Thank you. Town Solicitor?
Thank you. The day has come that I didn't know if it would ever arrive with regard to the Bay Street contamination litigation, officially known as Corvello versus Southern Union, and the related cases in the federal court. As the council knows from the executive session, and I think as the public knows somewhat from the as the council knows from that, and the public knows from some of the stuff that's already been in the press vis-a-vis the Director of Environmental Management and so forth, the case has been settled. And the settlement documents have been signed by the attorneys for the parties and the relevant corporate officers for Southern Union, and the town council president for the town has signed it. What has not been completed are signatories of all the various plaintiffs, particularly where some of the people have died since the lawsuit was first initiated, and their probate proceedings and guardianships and so forth. That is still going forward. There is a final closing on the settlement, but not anticipated for several more weeks. Nevertheless, the basic agreement, as I said, has been signed by the relevant people. It is no longer confidential. We did notify the other parties to see if any of them wanted to object to making it public. And although they weren't going to do it themselves, they said they didn't object to us doing it. So given the fact that the whole point of Rhode Island law on public information and public records is the bias is supposed to be towards disclosing it unless there's some reason to keep it confidential, I don't see a reason to keep these confidential any further. So what we have here are the key documents, the memorandum of understanding and the settlement agreement, which I would propose a vote to unseal them. Now, the rest of the information, all those executive sessions and so forth, I think need to remain sealed, the rest of the documents, until we have the final signing. And even then, we'll obviously have to check we'll have to go through the executive sessions to make sure there's nothing that shouldn't be disclosed, but I would anticipate that happening sometime in the fall. We'd be able to make everything public. But at this point, I don't see a reason to keep it further quiet. And I've presented you with a proposed press release as well to go along with it.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion.
We're looking for a motion to
unsealing,
unseal the records as to just the memorandum of understanding and the settlement agreement at this time.
I'll make a motion that we unseal and release the settlement agreement and the memorandum of understanding forthwith.
in the Corvello versus Southern Union.
Yes.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion beyond that? Seeing none, okay. All those in favor of the unsealing of the Corvello versus Southern Union Bay Street Settlement Agreement and Memorandum of Understanding, please raise your right hand.
The council, I know you already have copies of this from executive session, but I wanted you all to have the final copy copies, including
Okay.
the signatory pages. So,
How long do you think it would take us to read this, Mr. Counselor?
That's good
Well,
beach
well,
reading.
considering the fact that you've already seen them several times, I mean, there's no changes from the last time you've seen the document. I expect it will take the public a good couple of hours, and perhaps it would make good bedtime reading.
No, I think beach reading was like.
It's legalese and it's jargon.
Yeah.
But the information, I mean, and along with it, of course, DEM has released the site investigation report for public comment, and so there's all sorts of information out there.
Okay.
And I guess I would now request executive session.
We'll need a
For
motion.
the other litigation that goes on.
We'll need a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to 46, 5A2 litigation.
All those in favor? Unanimous.
And to remain in executive session pursuant to 42, 46, A2 on collective bargaining.
All those in favor?
And further to remain in executive session under 42, 46, 5A5, acquisition or disposition of town held property.
All those in favor? We are now in executive session. The meeting of the Tiverton Town Council to order by a salute to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The town clerk is all sorts tonight. Look at her, she's a mess. Town clerk. Oh, my gosh.
Counselor Lambert,
Present.
Counselor Roderick,
Present.
Counselor Durfee,
President.
Counselor Ruda,
Present.
Counselor Leonard,
President?
Counselor Costa,
Here.
Counselor Bolin is absent.
Okay. The next business brought before the council would be the consent agenda, and I would ask if Counselor Roderick, if you'd be so kind to read the consent agenda tonight?
This evening's consent agenda is approval of the council workshop minutes from June 29, 2009, approval of minutes from June 22, 2009 regular council meeting. Council Leonard abstained as absent. Approval of executive session minutes from June 22, 2009 council meeting. Council Leonard abstained, absent. Approval of